Today, we are joined by Shark Tank entrepreneur and alumni, the genius creator behind Detrapel. He actually scored a deal with Mark Cuban and Lori Greiner for $200,000. This is going to be a great episode. I cannot wait to get into this conversation with Mr. David Zamarin. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
David, it is my pleasure. So we got a lot to talk about, but I want to start from the beginning. I want to take the listeners on a little bit of a ride, a little bit of a journey. So you started Detrapel at 15. Walk me through why Detrapel and why this problem needed to be solved.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So a little bit of background. I grew up with an immigrant family. Both my parents are immigrants, and got married like 9 months into coming to the U.S. and meeting each other. And had me at two. Got divorced. Sorry, had me then got divorced when I was two. Uh, and my mom pushed education so heavily my entire life. My mom's side of the family was very big on kind of being educated, trying to do the best as possible in school. Whereas my dad, who also cared about education, had more of a push in business for me. Um, and so early on, I was dabbling with different types of ventures or whatever. And eventually I was accepted into one of the top high schools in the country. It's a public school, but a magnet school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. And I was accepted into that school, went there for middle school. And then I realized when I was applying to the high school that it was going to be incredibly hard to get in because all of my peers were ridiculously accomplished. I mean, everyone was like, state debate champ, mock trial champs. You name it, these guys are all doing it. They're all musicians. It's insane. A very competitive school. And so for me, I was a little intimidated. And so for me, when I was applying to the high school, I focused on a couple of things. And once I was finally admitted, I realized, wow, if that's how stressed I was about getting into the high school, how's it going to be when I'm applying to college? So I started thinking outside the box. Again, I did I did 12 clubs during my high school career, whether it was debate, sports, whatever, you name it, I did it. And even then, I felt like I was just blending in with my peers. I thought all my peers were still significantly accomplishing more than I was. And so I started thinking outside the box my freshman year of high school. And that's when I got into a program, a youth entrepreneurship program that was housed out of First Round Capital, one of the leading VC firms in the US. Um, it wasn't associated with with First Round, but it was in their facility and under the guidance and mentorship of many different people within the University of Pennsylvania, Drexel University, and just overall VC community in Philadelphia. And so I got a ton of exposure. I was the youngest kid in the program. I was the only non-senior, but I think I took it the most seriously. I really enjoyed the program. I thought it was my calling. I had other business ventures leading up to it, but I really realized that my passion was for entrepreneurship and not law as I thought so previously. And that's kind of when my entire path changed. And one of the
So
things that I,
before you move on to that, David, I have a
yeah,
question because you've kind of found your way to getting into the right place despite all the odds being against you. Do you attribute that to, before we move on to the second part here, do you attribute that to just dumb luck or to hustle or to strategy? How did you actually get into these programs where, I mean, by all standards, maybe didn't have any business being there, right?
sure, yeah, no, great question. Hustle is definitely, I mean, I think the number one thing that led me to where I was. Um, and on one hand, I believe in luck, and the other hand, I don't. Where I believe there's premeditated luck. I think every
Yeah.
situation that you put yourself in, though it can be lucky, you've put yourself in that situation. So, um, I think maybe the fact that I was the youngest person applying was an interesting aspect for the program. I also think that me having previous business ventures, I made 10 grand in one summer when I was a fifth grader, which was my first real business. And to me, I was like, again, I come from no money. So for me, that was a ton of money. And for a fifth grader in general, it's just a ton of money that I didn't know what to do with. And so, um, I had a little bit of experience, but nothing crazy at all. And I guess I struck a good conversation, and it seemed like I was going to take the program seriously, and I wish I did. And I think the people took a chance on me, a risk on me, and hopefully it paid off. Um, but yeah, kind of when I got into the program, going into that second part, one of the things I realized was I was accepted in the high school. I love sneakers. What do I hate more than anything? It was getting my shoes dirty. because I was given $200 from my grandparents as my gift for getting into the high school, and I bought Jordans with that. And I was desperate to keep them clean. Uh, so I came up with this idea that I wanted to come up with a film that could be peeled off whenever it got dirty, but I didn't know anything about chemistry. So my mentors uh, told me to pivot the business and start a shoe cleaning company for local university sports teams. And
Hmm.
so that's what I did for about 4 months. It was called Lick Your Soul, and the business actually was really successful. This is my first real company. Had employees or whatever, and grew it to the point where I was making a steady monthly revenue figure. But I realized that the only scalable part of the business was this conditioning service where I could spray something and it could repel any liquid-based substances. Um, I was buying a product from overseas, or actually it was in the U.S., but it was a different product, competitor of Detrapel's. And I learned, one, I was waiting 4 months for it to come to me. It was back ordered for so long because it went viral in 2013 when I started the business. And it was I learned that spray, it could be applied. It's kind of like a never wet or a Scotch Guard, if you will.
Yep.
If you apply it on a fabric, it dries white, it ruins the fabric, and more importantly, it's incredibly cancerous and toxic. It's horrible for the environment, horrible for your health. You need a full bodysuit and a respirator mask to apply it. And that's when I realized, not only is this thing harmful for you, it hasn't gotten here in 4 months, and it cost me $1,600 for a little quart. It was tiny and super expensive. That this was
Huh.
not going to be a scalable part of my business. So I actually was very lucky in that sense that I got an opportunity to sell the company, Lick Your Soul, and I did 4 months into it. And for me, again, ninth grade, I ended up not getting all the cash immediately. It was over a royalty structure, but I ended up making from that sale $150,000 over the course of a couple of years. And for me, again, that's a ton of money.
As a ninth grader.
Yeah, 14 years old, going on to 15 years old, tons of money for me. Luckily, I had very strict parents. I was not allowed to like waste money, so it
Mm.
was put to savings. And immediately that summer, I started researching the technology that ultimately became the original formulation for Detrapel.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is really unique and kind of crazy to me is you're in ninth grade. Obviously, one of the things that happens with students is you're in school all day, you come home, you got homework all night. Maybe you're doing extracurricular activities like sports or whatnot, but you're creating companies that are selling for six figures. You're getting six-figure exits in ninth grade, which is just truly, truly impressive because you're finding solutions for problems. Okay.
Right.
So we're talking about Detrapel, which is really special because it uses nanotechnology, right? It's using this
That's correct.
nanotechnology. And I think that most people, when they think of nanotechnology, it might as well be rocket science. It's not even the same stratosphere of something that we would ever even consider thinking about. How did you go from being a ninth grader taking English and math to developing a nanotechnology product for cloth protection? I don't understand how we got there.
The summer that I was going into my 10th grade, my sophomore year program at the high school, I enrolled as a part-time undergraduate into the University of Pennsylvania. My school offered this program where if you had a certain GPA, which everyone in my school did, you could take part-time undergraduate classes like a real student and get credits at Penn. And so I did that. But before I got to those classes, I also reached out to the Singh Center for Nanotechnology, which was a brand new facility. They spent like hundreds of millions of dollars on it, building it at Penn, and it had completed in 2013, I believe, or 2012. And I reached out to the leading researcher, just cold emailed them, and met with her a few times, started reading her research, learning about all the research that was going on, and found myself a chemistry mentor. And that's how I kind of started the original, I guess, R&D for the product and the research. And so when I look back at it, I mean, I didn't know anything about chemistry. So when people talk about, this exact question of, this is nanotechnology, it sounds so foreign. I agree, it is foreign. I didn't know what it was. To some degree, I think I still don't even know what it is. I'm kidding,
But what you
but
did was you put yourself with the right people, right?
correct.
So something you've said a couple times here, which is just really remarkable to me, David, and we haven't even talked about how you actually got in touch with Mark Cuban, which is pretty typical. You've consistently over the course of your life been able to reach out and connect with people that the average person would never be able to get with. On top of that, you're able to turn them into a mentor, which I mean, I don't know if you recognize how rare of a skill that is, but that is just truly remarkable. How give me a quick takeaway. How are you actually getting in touch and getting these people to actually respond back to your emails? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the one key ingredient that I don't think I've ever talked about. Glad you brought it up though. I think people are the most important thing in all aspects, life, business, whatever, right? Your team, whoever you have around you to help. Um, there was a really good episode on Forbes. It was a video and an article that I watched that was written by one of the partners at First Round Capital, Chris Freilich. He wrote this article about how to get a hold of the busiest people that you know. This is when I was in ninth grade when I saw this, and essentially it laid out 10 steps on how to cold email and cold email specifically really busy people that normally would not open your emails. And so naturally, I learned all those 10 steps. I researched them, tried to craft my own email, and I emailed Chris Freilich. He got back to me, had a interesting meeting with him. And then I said, I'll email the owner of First Round Capital, the founder, Josh Kaufman, who sold Half.com to eBay for $350 million early in the early 2000s. So I thought, okay, this is a nice big step. Even though I kind of was familiar with him because I was in his offices every day for the program. But he responded and bought some product, and that was nice. And then I said, you know what? Let's go big or go home. And I learned how to email hunt. It was one of the first few hard skills I would say that I learned or taught myself, and found Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban's like 4 different email addresses. Emailed all of them, same idea, same structure, and I got a response. And that was kind of the first step into me realizing how crucial and how just really how critical it is to have people around you, and more importantly, people that you can learn from, and even more so learn from their mistakes. And that was the number one thing that I was willing to do. I was willing to put away any pride, anything. I took free internships. I did 12 internships over my entire high school career, all for free. I never asked for a single dime. And I didn't care to, because I really genuinely believed that I was learning so much more just by being there around these people. And with, by working for free, I wasn't necessarily forced into having to do all these different remedial tasks. I was actually given substantive things to do on a daily basis. And so that's when I realized I was on something.
Yeah, so really taking on that executive role, putting yourself as close to the top as possible, because you it kind of rubs off on you, right? You get
Exactly.
that proximity bonus, super powerful. And I got to say, as far as a hard skill goes, knowing how to stand out and then where to send those messages, just absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So smart. Okay, so you've got a product, you've gotten it developed because you've gotten in with the University of Pennsylvania and their nanotech, and you're getting mentored by some of the scientists over there. Now you decide you're going to get on Shark Tank. You've reached out, you've gotten in touch with Mark Cuban, he's gotten in touch with Shark Tank. I'm just curious, give me a little bit of behind the scenes. What's it like going through the process of getting on Shark Tank and pitching on TV?
It's hard. It's not easy. I originally reached out to Mark, and I mentioned in a follow-up email in one of his responses that I was interested in going on the show because it was a lifelong dream of mine growing up. And he immediately put me in touch with the producers, the casting producers. But I really wasn't ready to go on the show, which was a blessing in disguise. So I actually waited for about 4 years until we were truly ready as a company to go on there. And even then we weren't ready. You're never really ready.
You're never ready, right?
No. But so eventually 4 years later, I did reach out finally, and I kept in touch with the producers, so they knew that my application was going to be coming in. I applied, and it's a really brutal process. I mean, they mentioned that they have, at least my year, it was 40,000 applications, and only 150 people are invited to film. So it's incredibly difficult to get on. And out of the 150 that film, only 90 of those air. Right. So it's not like everyone even gets to, even if you're there and you film, there's no guarantee. And they tell you, they happen to remind you every single time and every single moment that they have the chance to, that there's no guarantee of airing. Yeah. So it was difficult. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something that I anticipated having to do so much work for. But I'm glad that it happened, because it really did change the life of my entire company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to kind of zone in and hone in a little bit more on that thought here, David. And of course, listen, if you want to know more about David's company and his product, you definitely want to go to Detrapel.com. Links below. You definitely want to watch what David's doing on LinkedIn as well, because just a great place to connect with experts like David. So I want to lean in a little bit more to your experience on Shark Tank. You've managed to get in there because you just kept mentoring and connecting the dots all the way to the top here.
Yep.
What was it? What was a key moment when you're pitching? Because I'll be honest, I feel like someone who's not experienced in the whole venture capital and fundraising, you're sitting in front of five of the best TV cameras, lights, you're sweating and all that. What was a key moment where you felt that the deal maybe could have gotten away from you, but you were able to pull it and keep the clout yourself? How were you able to pull it off?
Yeah, there were two main moments that I recall. One moment was actually pre-airing or pre-filming. You have to do a dry run in front of all the producers the first or second day that you get there. And there are 150 producers, which
Whoa.
I had no idea that's how many people are working on the show in the background, in the behind the scenes. And so I did this pitch, and at that point, this is my sophomore year in college. Um, at this point, I've won, multiple pitch competitions for real money. I've done probably hundreds of different pitches in competitions, probably thousands in regular pitches. So, and public speaking and mentoring is something that I love to do. So this wasn't news to me. And it was certainly not the biggest crowd, but it was probably one of the most important crowds at that time. And I completely blanked right after the second line, which was my name. So I forgot my entire pitch. I forgot everything. Majority of the show is not scripted. Only the first portion when you walk in, it's all structured the same. When you say hello, my name is this. I'm looking for X in exchange for Y. That's usually the same structure. But even then, it's technically not scripted. Um, and so that one part that I had to remember was the part that I completely blanked out and forgot the entire pitch. So I was really scared at that point because, again, they tell you there's no guarantee that you will ever air or even get to the filming. So this is right before filming, the day before, 2 days before. So I was freaking out a little bit. Then the second time was right before I got into the studio to film. They actually bring you in to double check to make sure your booth looks nice and how you want it to. And that was kind of the moment where I actually saw the Sharks just sitting there on their phones and doing whatever the hell they were doing. And that to me was super surreal because I was like, these are celebrities in my mind. These are, TV personalities, some of the greatest investors, like you said, that people are aware of. And I'm over here freaking out. These people are just on their email casually. So I just did a couple jumping jacks and just walked in right after that. And that seemed to work. I just put a smile on and I was able to knock the entire pitch out, didn't have a single stumble. It was probably one of the better pitches I've ever done. And during the pitch, there was a point in time where I got asked about IP. And at the time, my IP answer, looking back at it, could have been a lot stronger. I specifically got asked about, whether or not we want to file a patent. And I didn't know. I was honest with the answer. I said I don't really know if we want to, because the reality is with a chemical patent you have to disclose your chemical, or you can do an application or a process patent and how we make it. But that's really the secret sauce. And so at the time, I didn't have great legal counsel for IP that I had previously reached out to, so I didn't actually have a solid answer. And so at that point, I thought I might have lost the deal, but I didn't. And I think I was able to reel it in because I explained that the situation is a lot deeper than the surface level of, oh, you should file for a patent. Ultimately, we did file for a patent, and we have multiple now. But ironically, at the time, I was pretty gung ho that I was not going to be filing for a patent. Little did I know that there are very specific ways to be conspicuous in your filing.
Mm. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you were really smart and you were really clear on all your other answers. You knew your numbers, which is probably the most important thing. You had a good answer for the EPA compliance, the FDA testing, and the various other factors. But I mean, just thinking as a regular human being, when I'm going to be investing in someone and basically partnering up with someone, I think probably the most important quality is trust, right? Do you think that being honest with your answer and clear with your answer was a part of the reason you were able to get the deal with both Mark and Lori?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a big factor of being able to win their trust and show that I was trustworthy. I also think that there's a big misunderstanding about being empathetic and being able to show that. And I think that the kind of the pinnacle of the top entrepreneurs, that when you think of the greatest entrepreneurs in the world, the one thing that they all you can connect the dots on, is that they all, when they needed to be, some of them are ruthless, but when they needed to be, they all knew how to show significant empathy.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I was honest and said, listen, I don't know the route that I want to take on the most critical question I was asked, uh, that could have really backfired in my face. But I think the reason why we were able to reel it in was just simply because it was truly the honest answer, and I wasn't trying to make up that I knew something that I didn't. I really didn't know which direction to go into, because I thought there were better options, but I was convinced otherwise. So
Yep. And I mean, you had basically the perfect scenario. You had two offers from two sharks. What was the point where you said Mark and Lori are the best fit for me? They're the best fit for Detrapel for David.
when I was going on to the show, I did a ton of research. I think for me, when I talk about being meticulous and being really strategic, it goes to a whole new level. I rewatched every single episode in history of Shark Tank before I went on.
Wow.
I had already seen probably every season up to season 6, because I actually interned for a company that was on Shark Tank in high school. So I was quite familiar with the process, but I really took the time to go rewatch every single episode and to write down every single question that was ever asked by every single shark, and to see what answers worked and what answers didn't work. And then I took it a step further, because this is where I believe empathy is taken to a whole nother level. I then did personal research on every single shark that I eventually found out was going to be on my segment. And when I say personal research, I mean I dug into like what their kids play for sports, what they do for, like on their free time. I wanted to be able to connect on every single level, and I did it subliminally. It's very not noticeable in the segment that was aired, but for example, I did it where when I'm pitching Mark and I mentioned that I'm from Philadelphia, I point to him because he's from Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
Uh, and I remember I said uh, something about having to do with moms or something like that to Lori. So I specifically picked on key moments, um, or key emotional things that I thought these people would react to. And I think I was right, but again, these guys are doing so many different things that you could have picked them a handful of things to bring up. But I think that's kind of the difference between pitches that do well and don't, the ability to connect to the audience, which isn't done often, and it's hard to do, rightfully so. Um, so I think when I was doing all this research and I found all the answers, I crafted my pitch. I thought I knew every answer. I went and pitched in front of some of the larger investors that I knew of, or some of the um, bigger mentors I had. I had a couple of mentors that were some of the most successful people in the Philadelphia region. One of which had a multi-billion-dollar exit of his own in his 30s or 40s. Um, and so I had them grill me, and I did that like on 4 or 5 separate occasions. And so that really prepped me for the questions that I both expected and then didn't expect. Uh, and funny enough, I didn't get any of the questions that I prepped for.
But you do the research, you know your audience, and I think, like you said, trust, being clear, knowing your numbers, and then making sure that you know those small details to be able to connect with your audience. I mean, this has been a common theme of our whole conversation, David. It's being able to do the research and know what's going to stand out to the people you're trying to connect with. It's just really, really smart. I wish more people kind of understood that. That's really the key. That's how you make it happen.
The
So
reality is
you
it's the only way to get close to someone, and it's the only way to show that you are just as serious as they are and you're not wasting their time, especially when they're in the upper position.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times when people reach out to me, it's very clear that they have no understanding as to what I do and what my team does. It's just, they always want to take, but the more you can give, the better your chance of actually connecting is. Yeah. I'm
Absolutely.
with you 100%. So you make this deal, you strike the deal, 200K for 25% with Mark Cuban and Lori Greiner. Obviously, you're just off Shark Tank. You get a huge uptick in sales. You're scrambling. You're getting all the orders out. But I'm kind of curious, what was it like working with Mark and Lori after the deal was finished? Are they just like, here's the money, go have fun? How involved were they in the process of growing Detrapel?
It's tough. So there's a due diligence process after the show,
Mm-hmm.
which most people don't know about, and that's when you actually close the deal. You just pitch in front of them, and then you agree to somewhat of terms that are supposed to be there. Um, very
So you have to
commonly
sign
they change.
contracts. They probably have to confirm certain information you give is accurate, I
For
would
sure,
think. Right?
yeah. They need to make sure that everything with you checks out. They don't have that time prior to when you're filming. But similarly, this is your time to kind of provide evidence or documentation or whatever it needs to be to show that you are legit and you're really running a business.
Mhm.
Now, 75% of deals that appear to close on air actually don't close. So that's
Wow.
another big misconception. Yeah, it's a huge number. Only 15 deals per season close.
Wow.
My offer or my deal with Mark and Lori did not close either, for various reasons. One of which, and this is a common thing, from them, things if they don't add up, in some cases, it doesn't make the deal whole for them, and that makes sense. On the flip side, they also are very sharky. They'll, you agree to a straight equity deal, and most of the time, that's not what you actually get. And
Hmm.
so, and I was already underselling the company, and I knew that going in, but I was happy to do it for the right partners.
Right.
And I thought Mark and Lori would be those two right partners, and so that's what I wanted going in, because I thought Mark could handle the kind of the science side and the industrial sales and the key strategic partnerships, whereas Lori could help me on the consumer and marketing side. Um, so for when we started doing due diligence and things started not panning out, we got to the very end. It was pretty much in close to December, a few weeks before my episode aired. It was a mutual agreement to pass. It made sense. I get why the deal fell through. Um, and then we got a notification that we were going to air in 2 weeks, and we started scrambling because we had nowhere close to the readiness that
Yeah.
we needed, and that was crazy. So the really saddening part and the really unfortunate part of me kind of being so upset about not having the deal close, was quickly kind of reversed as we had to go into action mode and make sure that we were ready for the uptick in traffic that we thought we would have, and we did have. Actually surpassed what we thought we were going to have, which was nice. But one of the things that I realized was that, with a lot of the deals, because the company that I was a part of, for example, during my high school career, when I was an intern that was on Shark Tank, and a couple of my friends that have been on Shark Tank, they all kind of say the same thing. And I've kept in touch with Lori's team and Mark's team. The reality is their team does everything. They're
Mhm.
not really that involved. And
Right.
for someone like Mark, that's understood because he's got hundreds of investments and hundreds of things going on. Um, so his team really takes care of everything. They have multiple lawyers, multiple business managers, you name it, they have it. And so what typically happens is if they see something's underperforming in your update, they'll kind of bring their team to help on that specific section, but they're not necessarily critical on making sure that you're doing X, Y, and Z 100% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that makes sense. When you're a billionaire, got all these different organizations, investments. It's not surprising that there's a ton of due deal. It's the classic thing of watching someone buy a house on TV, they renovate it, they move in 30 minutes later. There's a lot that goes in before you move
Right.
into that house. Trust me. I remember when my wife and I bought our first house. She's like, "This is nothing like on TV." I'm like, yeah, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. Okay, cool.
Right.
So before I let you go, I want to know what's the future of Detrapel. What are you working on now? I'm sure you're working on something. You're continuously innovating. What are you into now, David?
Yeah, we do a ton that's not visibly shown on our website. So we are a protective coatings company. We create all types of coatings, and the goal is to become the largest, and really first and foremost, the largest protective coatings company in the world. Um, but the caveat to that is that we are the only, and that's what our IP is all about, the only company in the protective coating space globally that is not using fluorinated chemicals. So we are the only
Mm,
company that boldly states that we are completely PFC and PFAS free, which are cancerous chemicals that are found in 99% of bloodstreams, unfortunately, in the US.
mm.
Um, it's a big problem. If you look it up, you'll see massive multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuits against the companies like DuPont, 3M, Chemours, so on and so forth. So it truly is a big problem, and unfortunately, almost every single thing that you can think of today has some sort of chain of a perfluorinated chemical, and unfortunately, it's not needed. So it's really something that's harmful. Yes, it's cheap to make, and yes, it's been around for decades, almost a century. Um, but it's an outdated technology that can be outperformed, and without having to risk any health effects or environmental effects. And so that's what we do. We create all types of different coatings that are completely PFAS free. Not only fabric protectors, which are both applied by consumers or in the manufacturing phase, We also work with, like I said, we work with like carpet manufacturers who will apply this during the manufacturing phase so that the end consumer buys the carpet that's already treated, so that you don't have to worry about when your dog or cat pees or poops on the carpet. It can come right off. But we also have antimicrobial coatings for hard surfaces. We created a disinfectant right before the pandemic hit, actually, along with a hand sanitizer. So that really picked up quite a bit, and helped us launch our retail campaign. But we're really a B2B company. That's what we do. We create
Yeah.
specialized coatings, specialty coatings for as many companies as you can think of, whether it's in agriculture, which you would think, how the hell do we have anything to do with agriculture? But we do. Military, defense, you name it. We are in a few different categories because our chemistry is super unique. And my R&D staff, that's the biggest cluster, I guess, or group of people that I have in the company. It's my R&D staff. They drive a ton of innovation, and we have a lot of work going towards trying to become the leading edge company with cutting edge technology in the space that's completely different than what's been out there for the last 100 years.
Love it. Love it. Solving problems, biologically safe, environmentally safe, super, super powerful stuff. David, if you've got another 2 minutes, I want to go to a couple rapid fire
Let's
questions.
do it.
All right. Cool. So quick rapid fire here with the Shark Tank whiz, David Zamarin. David, if you woke up in the morning, you could only do one business task for the day, what would you do?
Uh, I want to say I would do what I normally do, which is my emails. It's most of my day. Um, but no, the reality is I'd probably want to do something team focused. I'd want to give that day to focus on the people that have helped me grow and that continuously make the company what it is today.
Love that. Team building, delegating, smart,
Yeah.
smart, smart, smart. If you had 10 seconds with yourself 10 years ago, what would you say to yourself?
Get started sooner.
Ooh, I like that. And final question here for you. If you had a billboard that could reach millions and millions of people, what would you put on your billboard?
I try to put something, if I'm trying to be company focused, I'd be putting something like, essentially stop drinking cancer or something like that, because drinking water has PFAS chemicals. And again, you don't need to
Oh,
use PFAS chemicals,
yeah.
or stop using cancerous products. Or, if it was something more, I want to say personally driven, and not company driven, I just really encourage people to get started and start focusing on all the outside noise.
Get started. Get started. I love that. David said it. I agree with it. David, thanks so much, brother.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.